something that struck me in my political times was that when people don't know, when they don't have enough of a technical knowledge, they tend to rely on beliefs. It becomes like, a faith thing. So you believe that nuclear energy is good or bad. You believe that GMOs are good or bad. Most often, technology isn't good or bad. It is what you do with it.
Welcome to Energy Vista, a podcast on energy issues, personal and professional trajectories. I'm your host, Leslie Palti-Guzman. In each episode of this podcast, we chat with energy experts from all around the world. We exchange on timely energy issues as well on their life experience. It's May 14, 2021, and time for a new Energy Vista episode. Today I'm exchanging with Nathalie Kosciusko-Morizet, ex-Minister of Environment in France, and well known by her initials NKM. Nathalie is an engineer by training. She studied at the renowned École Polytechnique, spent years in the French public sector as a member of parliament, a mayor, and a cabinet minister, a secretary of state for the environment in France, before moving to the US to work in the private sector. As of this week, she started a new role as a senior partner at Antin Infrastructure. And through the podcast, we will discuss simultaneously her areas of interest around environment, energy, and infrastructure, and her professional journey, because both are very intertwined. Hi, Nathalie.
Hi, Leslie.
Thank you very much for joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's an honor, and I'm very happy to exchange with you on so many different topics because you understand all the energy, infrastructure, environmental issues from a technical point of view as an engineer, but also as a former policymaker, and now from the industry perspective, so bottom-up perspective, top-down perspective. So let's get to it. And first, I would like to ask you about the nexus of the cyber attack and critical infrastructure. In your last position at Capgemini, you were in charge of devising solutions and think proactively about those cyber threats. And today's in the news in the US, we see that the company Colonial Pipeline had to pay a ransom after being under attack for basically threatening the flow of oil in the US, putting pressure on prices and threatening a shortage of oil. And so we see that it's potentially, not just oil infrastructure, but other critical infrastructure, water or electricity or way of life that can be increasingly more threatened by those attacks. How should we think about it? And is there a way to reduce risks? And probably a combination of private sector and public sector together thinking about those issues?
Sure. Well, first thing I could say is that it's here. It's not coming. It's here. And it's maybe in some cases even more here than you would believe, because some of these attacks are just coming and they are in and out. But some of those hackers also specialize into putting plugs into your system, sort of sleeping, malwares that they can awaken anytime. So when I say it's here, it may be even close. Now, how do you fix it? Well, obviously you need first awareness. And that's where, we all have a role, and especially, obviously, the public sectors and governments, and maybe incentivizing, corporates to take it seriously enough, because historically it's been, let's say, diverse on this front. There's also a thing I believe that is important to keep in mind, which is that there are technical solutions. There are things that you need to do, that you can do to improve the resilience of your system. Like if you're in the manufacturing world doing network segmentation, work on your identity access management, build, the right firewalls, make sure that you have, frequent updates to your system, that any patches that come out, are rolled out immediately, this type of thing. So there are technical solutions, there are things to be done. There are some architectures of your system that would be more protective than others. But no technical solution is a silver bullet. So you need to work on your architecture, first to assess your situation, certainly, then work on your architecture, use available tools, but also think about your people. Because a number of these attacks begin with people-related problems. It can be intentional, it can be unintentional, but it's very, very often people-linked. So it's very rarely only a technology problem, and it's certainly never a technology-only solution.
Good. Well, I guess we'll speak again about those issues for a while. But let's travel to France now and talk about your upbringing and what shaped NKM and the first act in your life, which was politics and your long-standing passion for environment. So what motivated you to study engineering? You were born into a family that was into politics already, your grandfather, your father, and you turned also into politics, but first you wanted to study engineering.
Well, yes. And I feel like, despite I haven't, practiced much engineering in my professional life, obviously, I was a politician for 15 years, and then I've been, more the managing side of businesses. I feel very much an engineer in my nature. I've kept something and more than something of it. Maybe in the way I approach questions. I like to deep dive. I like to understand. I want to be always one step ahead in terms of understanding, maybe 2 or 3, wherever I can reach about anything that I'm doing. I like to really go to the bottom of things. And so, as I said, I haven't really worked as an engineer in my life. It's been extremely useful to me, this sort of training type of mindset. And also more, I would say, strangely enough, in my political times, because by that time, and it's still the case now, there were very, very few engineers in the French political system. There is a sort of, in the past there were some, but more recently you will find some more, lawyers, teachers, medical doctors, but not that many real technical people, which at some point when you need to have discussions about quite technical issues is a problem. Mm-hmm. And it was useful to me, obviously, in my various tenures, especially as a minister. At some point, I was a minister of more or less all, infrastructure from a public standpoint. And I believe also this engineer culture could be better represented, and it would help. Sometimes I was a member of parliament for 15 years. Sometimes you have, in these situations, very weird discussion where the topic becomes technical, and it's not so easy for people that don't have a sense of it to really take the good decisions and even ask the right questions. Even just before taking the decision, ask the right questions.
Mm. Yeah, we definitely need more science in our public life, I guess, and less ideology or dogma. And often engineers are more likely to follow science.
Yeah, maybe this is something I like to rebound on that. Something that struck me in my political times was that when people don't know, when they don't have enough of a technical knowledge, they tend to rely on beliefs. It becomes like, a faith thing. So you believe that nuclear energy is good or bad. You believe that GMOs are good or bad. But this is more of a belief. There is not enough reasoning behind it. And I'm not taking here a position. I'm just saying that most often, technology isn't good or bad. It is what you do with it.
Yeah.
And you need to have a minimal understanding of it, so that it becomes familiar enough so that you can move to the next step and really have a sound opinion around applications and ways to regulate them if needed or not. If you don't have the minimal understanding, well, you tend to rely on your own beliefs or a prioris, and that's rarely a path to great public policies.
So how was it to work actually on environmental affairs in the late 90s, early 20s, when you started your professional journey? You were in your mid-20s, late 20s at then, but climate change was not a priority back then. And the awareness also in the public opinion was minimal. Was it complicated for you to position yourself?
Well, yes, obviously. But I was lucky enough to be part of this whole journey, which began with nearly no awareness or public interest and ended up, well, it's far from ending, but brought us where we are now with a real public interest and a great momentum around. When I began working on environmental issues, it was in the 90s. If you spoke about, for example, greenhouse effect, nobody would understand what it was. Very, very few people. It was a small circle of people that were interested into that. And I'm speaking of, by that time we designed the Kyoto Protocol. This was in 1997. In 1997, all those people were gathering to work on the Kyoto Protocol. And nevertheless, public awareness was very, very low. In France, especially by that time, the most recent, let's say, transborder environmental issue had been what was called the acid rain, which were related to the sulfur content, sulfur in some fuels. And so people, for example, would mix things. You would speak about greenhouse gas effect and explain a little bit of what it was, and they will mix it up with this acid rain problem that was more 80s related. And I'm very impressed by how much, and I like to think about it. I like to look at it because when you look only forwards in terms of environmental challenges, you see mountains, you see all that needs to be done. But sometimes it's also good to look a little backwards and see where we're coming from in not such a long time. And over 20 years, there has been, such a huge change in terms of awareness and desire to change things, to really address the problems. I'm not saying in any manner that we are there, but I feel we're in a much better position, both, technology-wise, business model-wise, mobilization-wise, than we were 20 years ago. I feel like things can happen now.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah. That's great to hear. That's great to hear an optimistic view, because sometimes you hear very pessimistic views out there that the end of the world is coming.
Yeah. Well, again, we haven't fixed the problem, but at least people are aware of the problem.
Right.
We can discuss it. The circle of people who really reject the discussion are smaller and smaller, and there are options. There are options to fix it. Again, I'm not saying that it's done deal, not at all. But there are paths to really address it, and not only paths. I mean, I'm not only speaking about technological paths. I'm speaking also about desires, trends in the society, and I believe this is extremely important because the major changes obviously happen because there's a technological breakthrough, but the technological breakthrough is not enough. I'm back to what I said. Technology, is not good or bad or whatever. Technology is not changing the world by itself. Yeah. It's about what you make of it. And there are trends in the society with a desire to address the problem, as I said, decarbonization, desire for better life, well-being, health. There are also new structural trend like desire for proximity. It brings some attraction to decentralized solutions, for example. So there are all these combined together and, let's say, make it possible. Now, the next step to make it really possible is obviously, and this is still undergoing, to adapt, the regulatory framework, because some of these need a certain framework to take off, and there's also a need for capital, which is maybe one of the big differences between clean tech and just tech. Because I'm not saying that there's no capital in tech. Obviously, that would be ridiculous. But let's say there are certain models in the tech sector where you can begin something with very, very small capital. It's different in the clean tech business. At some point, to scale up, you need some, and actually a lot of capital. It's massive because it's, if you want to decarbonize the economy, it's not just an app on your phone. There are real asset investments that need to happen, and that's where the infrastructure sector at large will be so important.
So since you mentioned the infrastructure, and right now in the US, we've seen that the Biden administration is proposing a massive infrastructure plan, $2 trillion, still in negotiation with lawmakers. And as of this week, actually, you joined a new company. Congratulations, an infrastructure investment group. Infrastructure is definitely going to be the backbone to deliver our climate change agenda and the sustainable development of tomorrow. So do you agree with the consensus that the time is ripe today and it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity because we're coming out of COVID-19, we have massive stimulus package, plus now the priority of climate change is so obvious?
Yeah, and if I may, it's not only a one-in-a-generation opportunity, but it's a one-in-a-generation responsibility. This is happening now, but this has to happen now. We need it now. One of the things that I found extremely interesting in the recent infrastructure bill and all the discussions around it here in the States was this very open mindset about what is an infrastructure. And I think that's extremely important because all along history, the concept of infrastructure, well, what is infrastructure, is not stable. What is infrastructure is what allows economy, society to develop, and it's a sort of foundation. Well, but the foundations are a little different depending on the times, and technology. Obviously, a new technology very often brings a need for a new infrastructure. I take you an example. Let's not be too theoretical. Well, trains. Before there were trains, you didn't need railways. But once you had train, railways became a huge thing. And in fact, at the end of the 19th, especially in Europe, the railways companies were the biggest company. That was the thing. Same with plane. Before there were commercial airplanes, you didn't need airports. So infrastructure are what allows new tech to develop, and obviously today we have some of those new technologies developing, growing. We need them. Well, we will need the infrastructure that will support their development. And I could give a bunch of examples from obviously EV charging to new, more sustainable fuels, especially for the usage that you can't decarbonize by switching to electricity, like, for example, aviation. But I mean, it's true. It's true across the board. You could find example in the farming business. You would find some in the education or healthcare. With transformations, with new tech, comes a need for new infrastructures.
So actually, with the Biden administration, we see also that climate action is going to be all across the governments, all the agencies, all the policies. And this is something you've been advocating for a while, like not to have silos, but to see environmental policies more generally speaking all around us.
Yeah, and I've been lucky enough to be the minister in charge of bringing this together in France. It was in between 2007 and 2012. For the first time in France, we brought together different administration that used to work separate, but I mean, worse than separate, that used to work sometimes against each other, or at least in a conflictual mode. Like you had the so-called equipment ministry, which was sort of, transportation, all that was transportation and infrastructure related. You had obviously the energy and industry ministry. You had the ecology ministry that had very conflictual relationship with all of it. And the approach was very siloed. And all those administrations were brought together to build a big, very large Ministry of Infrastructure, so that the arbitrage could be solved inside the ministry, and we could develop really transversal policies. And I'm a very, very strong believer that in the current transformation that we are going through, the greatest both public policies and business model are not in the silo, not pure energy, not pure mobility, not pure urbanism, whatever, but across them, plays that run across those historical silos. And one of the other things that we did by that time with a program that we called the Grenelle de l'Environnement was to put all stakeholders around the table, which was sort of, it began with some sort of humility from, a public standpoint, governmental standpoint, because this was about recognizing that it was so large. The need for transformation was so huge that not a single actor could do that. We needed to step away from the traditional way of doing, which was very much command and control, a little subsidy, a lot of regulation. And we are the public sector, you are the actors, we tell you what you're going to do. Well, it didn't work that well, by the way, even by that time. And in no manner it would address, the big upcoming challenges. So this was about bringing all the actors, stakeholders around the table, and also changing the tools of the public policies. So stop doing a little subsidy, stop doing, just constraint regulation, but discuss with them, try to design tools that were really engaging for everyone, and do co-investment. There's not enough money on the state side, especially in Europe at that time. There's not enough money to do it. We need everyone together, and obviously state, but the federal state. But the local authorities and the private sector.
So to give a little bit of context for our listeners, so you became the Minister of Environment, Sustainable Development, Transportation and Housing in 2010 under the presidency of Nicolas Sarkozy. And the Grenelle of the Environment were known to be like this open, multi-party debate between the government, the industry, NGOs, unions. So what do you think is the state of the debate of our society now on environmental issues? Do you think it's a healthy debate that we have? Do you think it should be more technical, less technical? Do you think that citizens are aware of the implications of all the transformation we're going to be undergoing? We had the yellow vest movements in France a few years ago. Do you think that could happen again? We may maybe see higher electricity bills in Europe, in the US. we may have more taxes, we may have, some more transmission lines in our backyard. Is everybody, on the same page on all the transformation and compromise we each need to do?
Yeah, and that's a great question. The good news, there is one good news, which is that awareness is there, and not only awareness, desire to do well. I remember a sequence in France, but by the time I was a minister, as you mentioned, we wanted to build a new tool for car sales. This was called bonus malus. You would get bonus if you bought a low emission car, and you would get we would pay a malus if you bought like a SUV or something. Now, what happened was that the system was designed to be balanced. All the maluses should pay for the bonuses, and it was designed with the help of a Ministry of Finance using, supply-demand curves, traditional one. Well, it didn't work out well because when designing it, they used only, economical tools. They did not incorporate this desire that people had to do well. And in fact, people bought much more low-emission cars than expected, step back from the higher emission cars. So the system became financially unbalanced, but this was for a good reason. This was because people, in fact, took their decision much beyond the economic incentive. So the desire is there. Now, this is on politicians, and I think also on corporates to find the tool to make it happen and design them in a sufficiently cooperative manner with eyes and ears wide open to the society, so that everybody can find their interest and recognize it. Because you mentioned the Yellow Vest movement, which stemmed at least partially from problem of carbon tax. In some situations, public policies, or sometimes, by the way, new technologies like GMOs or whatever have been pushed to the market or to the public without enough debate or consensus. And then if you try to do things too quickly, we want to do things quickly. I have a great sense of urgency. Climate change is happening, but you also need to keep in mind that adoption is paramount. And adoption comes with understanding and also a recognition that the policy is balanced, that everyone will get a benefit from it. This takes time. Sometimes not enough time has been taken for explanation, discussion, or also maybe really visible rebalancing of the policies so that it's clear that everyone will get a benefit from it. And climate change or ecology is not just used by certain groups in the society to obtain a gain or something. Or this is worse than everything when people have the feeling that ecological challenges are being used to gain something that is not ecology related. Of course, then you face rejection. That's very natural.
Yeah. So as a minister, also under your leadership, there was the ban the technology of fracking in France. So that's the technology used to extract shale gas. And so I've been following, for a decade now, the ambiguous relationship between France and shale gas. It came back to the news actually last October when Engie, the French group, canceled the long-term contract to import US shale gas to France and Europe, following the involvement of the French government. So what's, in your opinion, the origin of this fraught relationship in France between this technology of fracking, but also, US shale gas in general? It would be interesting, and then I'll give you maybe my opinion.
Well, that's a great illustration of things we've been discussing in this podcast. First, as we mentioned earlier, technology is not good or bad. Technology is what it is, and it depends what you do with it. So there are, places, situation where fracking is certainly not, a great environmental options, and certainly situations where things are very, very different. So there's no a priori to have. Now, what happened with France at that time was exactly what we just discussed, which is that it was permits were given, delivered without real discussion, without even local awareness. So in some cases, and those permits were, attributed in some regions in France where there is a high ecological sensitivity for a number of reasons. Certain are, geologically related, some are more sociological related, but there are grounds for that. And so it happens that in those places, in those regions where the permits were delivered, you had, for example, mayors that weren't even aware that their municipalities, the town was in this scope. So, of course, when they realized, it created immediate rejection, because they had the feeling that things had been going up, things had been happening without them in their back, So something had to be hidden. If they were not in the loop, it was because something bad was going on, and so it was obviously not the best way to launch a discussion. So clearly we had to, and I'm very, very comfortable with that, because actually this was done with my predecessor. So when we realized that things had been rolled out without any consultation, without any discussion, very, very clear rejection. Yes, obviously we stepped back, and I think we did the right thing. I think it would have been a huge mess.
Yeah. But I think it stayed in the psyche in France, like this, shale gas is evil.
Yeah, but that's what happened when you roll out too quickly a technology without explaining, and even with pushing. I understand the business reasons behind it, because sometimes timing is also great importance. But when you do that, you take a risk. So, and you take a risk of creating a very deep, long-lasting rejection, because after that, it sort of sticks.
Yeah. And do you think there is a tendency in France also to, like, everything made USA can be judged, critically? Like, we like to be more nuanced, and sometimes maybe there is a touch of anti-Americanism, a disguise of geopolitics. I mean, when we see right now, like the imports of shale gas, right? So on one hand, it can be, well, if we have banned frack gas in France, it would be hypocritical. It wouldn't make sense to import shale gas. On the other hand, it's a molecule, right? Of course, it can be.
I wouldn't draw any general conclusion from the shale gas question. I mean, France and the US have a sort of passionate love story relationship. So yes, it comes with great attraction, and sometimes also with all sort of fantasies on both sides, by the way. And that's okay. That's what it is. What happened with shale gas, with some other technologies, is that once it became a polemicy, it was sort of stigma. It was done. It sort of sticked, and because it was so, the debate was so passionate at the time, there was no really room for discussion. A number of people, a majority of people, are probably not aware that the chemical formula of shale gas formula, molecular and the natural gas, and this is just methane. This is exactly the same stuff. But even that is, I mean, I would be surprised if a majority of people did not believe that it's not the same. It's like, and once it's there, once it's embedded, it's very, very difficult to change that perception.
Yeah, totally. It was true to the form, to the French, and the history behind it. So now that you live in the US, what's your view on transatlantic relationship? And do you think there will be some areas actually of cooperation on infrastructure between Europe and the US?
Oh, yes. So first thing, I think we clearly need all hands on deck. So, and not only... I was speaking about stakeholder earlier, but also, geographies. And each geography has, for, historical reasons, sometimes geopolitical reasons, has its own focus. There will be topics where Europe will lead the way, clearly. Right now, it's very much happening, for example, on hydrogen. But there will be also some topics where US will lead the way. Could take the example of battery storage in some respect, or CCUS, carbon capture and storage, usage and storage is probably high on the agenda in the US, and it's okay. By the way, it's sort of good news because we need all of these. So and let's move the quicker we can wherever it's mature. And share experience all across. Again, we need all of these, all hands on deck.
Yeah, great to hear. Well, thank you so much, Nathalie, for joining the podcast. And we'll have you back maybe to discuss more about infrastructure and all those new technologies in the next episode.
Thank you very much, Leslie.
This is Leslie Palti-Guzman saying good day and good luck. This episode was recorded on May 14, 2021.